Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It means the world to me that we were able to put this together and be so helpful to everyone. My name is Sarah Rasnick. I am the founder of Natural Health Network. And Natural Health Network is a vetted directory that is growing nationwide of holistic products, providers, and services that you can trust to go to get your questions answered and just live healthier, happier lifestyle. The reason that we are here today is because we have gotten so many questions from all facets, from so many different women that ultimately go back to hormone imbalance. And they have so many symptoms of everything from irregular periods, chronic pain, mood swings, anxiety, sleep disorders, all kinds of things. And then they are going to their trusted practitioner and getting blood work done and being told that their numbers are normal and that basically it's just a normal part of aging and that basically just have to deal with it. Or they're given options of only either very invasive surgery or medications or things like that. While we don't discourage medications and surgery that are actually needed, the thing is there's so many other options that can happen and that can help you balance out these things and manage these symptoms and get back to feeling yourself before we explore those more invasive options. So that is what we are here today to share. And because we want you to know that not feeling normal is not normal. And we want to take you on a journey from confusion to clarity, just to help you along the way and let you know what testing is available, what functional testing is available to help you get to that root cause. And then what can we do through diet, through gut health, through just lifestyle factors that help you find balance that often you weren't taught before. I'm excited to take you on this journey. Please know that nothing shared here is medical advice. It is all just experience and from professionals that is here to inform you of what is available. But if you have specific questions, feel free to reach out to either your provider or reach out on Natural Health Network to any of your trusted providers there. It is a directory, like I said. So today's framework is going to be 4 holistic providers that are going to present on different subjects. And then there will be a slide for each of our presenters that will give their information. There will be a QR code that you can scan to connect with them if you so choose. And then there will be a 15-minute Q&A session where we will take more general questions that can be helpful to everyone. Again, if you have specific questions, feel free to reach out individually. And then those question and answers, again, are not medical advice. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Ms. Wendy Schuff. She is a registered nurse and naturopath with 30 years experience treating all kinds of different patients. So take it away, Wendy.
Thanks, Sarah. So happy to be here. And I'm just so honored to be a part of this process of walking alongside women to find their balance and restore their health. It is such a misunderstood topic. And that is exactly why I left the traditional medical practice field over 10 years ago now. I was walking this journey alongside my own mother who had a hormone-driven cancer. And even being a medical professional, I thought it was grossly misunderstood and misdirected. And I knew there had to be better out there. Unfortunately, she did not win that battle, but I've made it my mission ever since then to help women be understood. And after being misunderstood in my own body, in my own self, I knew that I couldn't possibly be the only one out there. And so I have been in the holistic world for a little over 10 years. And one of the things that I've learned is that women are often the last person heard in the room. Even when I was working in the hospitals, I saw that Men always had the whole room's attention. Children are always there with their parents or an advocate, so they always have someone to speak for them. But women are often the silent sufferers. And I think because of that, it plays a big role in being misunderstood or under listened to. I think women have just taken that back seat to their own health. And especially as we approach seasonal changes in our lives, particularly perimenopause, it becomes a very confusing time. So I'm happy to help people navigate that. Unfortunately, I'm usually people's last stop, their last resort. They have tried everything, or they've thought they've tried everything so far, and they're just desperate. So I really want to encourage you that if anything resonates with you today with any of the speakers, that you reach out to someone before you feel desperate, because it's so much easier to take control and have balance when we are proactive versus reactive. And so if there's nothing else you take away today, then that is that women need to be heard. And if you don't feel listened to and understood, you're probably with the wrong provider. And don't be afraid to switch and find someone that is working for you in your best interest. A lot of things that my clients tell me when they come through the doors is that, oh, yes, I have labs and they're all normal. And I'm like, okay. And then I look at their labs, and first of all, they have very little labs to even look at, but they're certainly not normal. They're in the range, but they're not normal. And we'll get to that. They also hear things like, well, this just happens when you get older. And again, Sarah mentioned earlier, it just because something is common doesn't make it normal. And please know the difference between common and normal, because it is definitely common. All you have to do is open Instagram to know that it's common, and everybody's trying to teach you something about it. Another key one that I get is that it's just anxiety or depression or both. And let's give you something for both of those, because more is better. Those are symptoms. They're not an actual, they are a problem, but they weren't the problem to begin with. They're a symptom of an imbalance. Or they're told things like, well, you're just stressed. You just need to relax. Like, if you could relax, you would. This is just part of the transition of life. Just get over it. This is what women have been doing for centuries. But I'm here to tell you, they haven't been doing it this way for centuries. So again, it is common, but not normal. So we're going to try to walk you through what actually normal should look like. But women often feel dismissed and a little bit crazy. In fact, I have my most common handout that I give out is called "You're Not Losing Your Mind, You're Losing Your Hormones." And it was something a good friend of mine put together years ago, and it's just excellent resourcing. But it is because they try to make you feel a little bit crazy at this time. And your symptoms are not imaginary. And as we're going through the changes of entering it, a lot of our focus today is going to be on perimenopause, but I want you to know that everything we say does really apply to women in all stages and ages of life, because it's just sound advice. But particularly when women are going through changes, not even just perimenopause, it's an imbalance first before it's a deficiency. And a lot of people think that that's the other way around, but it's not the case, because the ovaries in perimenopause are usually still making hormones, especially estrogen, but they don't release them in a predictable or balanced way. Instead of a steady decline like women in centuries before had, we're seeing roller coasters, spike, up, down, up, down. Every day is a different day. And boy, do you feel it. You certainly feel like a different person every single day sometimes. And oftentimes you're feeling like that within the same day. And you're like, oh my goodness, it's just really hard to navigate when you're feeling like this in the same day. Progesterone is one of the other hormones that's the first to go. Guys, I'm seeing low progesterone in girls as young as 9 and 10 years old. Moms are coming to me saying their daughters are starting their cycles at 8 or 9, and they're wonky and they're all over the place, which is kind of be expected at that age. But at the same time, I'm testing them in preteens and teens, and they have no or little, very little progesterone. There's a lot of reasons for that, but I think the biggest is our sourcing of our food in America right now. And Renata's going to give us some great information on that a little bit later, so I won't dive into that soapbox. When our progesterone declines, whether it's from natural causes or unnatural causes, this is when we start to have irritability, mood swings, fatigue, brain fog, anger, and usually last is the cycle to change. So a lot of times we're experiencing those things before the cycle even changes. And because so many women have had partial or full hysterectomies, they don't even know there's a cycle change because they're not cycling anymore. So they're just experiencing all of these emotional issues and being put on antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds, in my opinion, unnecessarily, or at very least prematurely. And so there's a lot of help out there before you have to resort to that, because it's not really easy getting off of those things. But when the progesterone takes a nosedive and your estrogen is still at peak or at normal or even elevating, it's going to feel higher than normal, because it's that ratio between progesterone and estrogen that makes us feel normal, that makes us feel balanced. So when one rises and the other falls, doesn't matter which one, if either are out of that perfect ratio balance, we will have symptoms of some sort. So estrogen is often checked and told it's normal, and it usually is, but it's the progesterone that is low. And progesterone so often gets referred to as the pregnancy hormone, which is true, but we also need it all the time. Even into menopause, we still need it. It protects our organs, our brains, our bones. So we need it in small amounts or in differing amounts at all stages, but in smaller amounts as we age. But when the estrogen is high and the progesterone is non-existent or not high enough, we are definitely going to be able to have a lot of symptoms. We're struggling with a true imbalance at that part. And true hormone deficiency, instead of imbalance, but deficiency, comes much later, usually a lot closer to menopause, when the ovaries are starting their natural decline. So perimenopause is your warning. This is your body saying, hey, your system is under stress. Some things are about to change. It probably will get a little rocky, but it doesn't have to be a roller coaster. So I usually tell my ladies, you should expect it to feel a little bumpy, but you shouldn't expect to be jumping off a cliff every other day. There's a big difference in that. So early perimenopause, we see a lot of hormone chaos, but in later menopause, we see true hormone deficiency. And understanding that difference is truly critical, because treating them both in the same way can create more problems than they can relieve. And that's really what I've been seeing a whole lot of too. So historically, they were giving synthetic hormones, and we saw a big problem with female related cancers and such. And so it got a really nasty stigma. And so now they're learning differently. And now everywhere I see people being handed out hormone replacement therapy, but they're giving, in my opinion, they're giving it out a little too soon in a lot of cases, before doing foundational work, before supporting the body, and before seeing what the body's capable of. So they're typically running labs. They're so happy to jump on labs, right? But they're running them either at the wrong time or using the wrong test, because lab reference ranges, FYI, all lab reference, not just hormonal reference ranges, but they're based on men, if you didn't know that. And they're based on a sample of the population, not just people who feel optimized. So if they sampled a population of men, or even if they did sample with women, you're sampling people who might also be imbalanced. And so now that's the norm, right? That's the common, but that's who you're being compared to. You're not being compared to people who are optimized. And that's really the biggest difference when someone says functional testing versus traditional testing, is that we're looking at those reference ranges with a whole new set of lenses, with a whole new eye. We're looking for where people and women feel really good and that their body's functioning at their best, at the best capability. So when we do blood work, especially even if you're a cycling woman, if you're still having your cycles, rarely ever, I've never been asked by even my OBGYN, what day of your cycle are you on? You would think that since we have low estrogen, it rises, it peaks, peak progesterone, decline, If we were checking for certain things, don't you think we should know where on the cycle of our chart we should be? And so that's why it often looks normal. So there's a huge range because they're actually taking normal from the lowest day to the highest peak day. And if it falls anywhere between those two ranges, you're normal in their eyes. But it doesn't really mean you have enough progesterone to ovulate or to carry a child or estrogen to even sustain brain activity at that point. So that is really the biggest push in my book for doing functional testing or holistic alternative testing, is because we are looking at where your cycle is falling if you're cycling. If you're not cycling, all of those are factors, or if you're irregular for women who have a 28-day and then a 45-day and then a 12-day. So there are very specific tests, which we'll get into later, that someone else will highlight for you as to which test we would choose in that situation. But it's certainly not a blood test. About the only reliable time I use a blood test on a hormone is for testosterone. Testosterone in women does not fluctuate greatly. It's one of the ones that we have that keeps a steady pace. And so I will use blood work for testosterone. And what we want to understand is not just, is it low when we're looking at these values, but we also want to know, what is the body compensating for? And is the body able to detox hormones effectively? Because that's the next biggest problem that we see, is that I see women all the time they bring me their blood work and their estrogen is maybe really high, but they don't know how to get it down. And that's a sign for me that the liver is congested. And so we need some additional testing. We need to look at why it's holding on to certain hormones and not holding on to others. It's very common for me to see women who are on very high dose progesterone. It's barely making a dent. They're not even on estrogen and it's through the roof. And they don't know, their doctors don't know why. And then that's when they find people like us, because their doctors sometimes don't understand that they should have been checking their patient's body ability to detox and to get rid of excess hormones. So that's something incredibly important to me before I will put a woman on hormone replacement therapy, is to check her liver in detail. And again, not just running the liver panel that the doctor orders and looking at the reference ranges going, it looks good, you're normal, it looks great, we're good to go. Certainly that's a great first step, but there's definitely small shifts and trends that we need to look at with deeper testing to give very good information for me personally to feel comfortable in recommending a hormone for you that could cause your body harm if it built up and sat there and nobody noticed. So we're looking for patterns. We're looking at your body's metabolism, your body's clearance, your body's adrenals, your thyroid. All of those things are stuff that we're looking at when we are asking you to do alternative or functional testing that your regular doctor may or may not be picking up. I rarely ever see them pick it up. Unfortunately, even with endocrinologists, they're supposed to be the special guys, right? I actually feel like they've done the worst job, just in what I've seen. I can't speak for all of them. I'm certainly not here to bash physicians in any way, form, or fashion. They really just aren't trained. They're not getting this type of training. And I'm not seeing functional testing come out of most traditional physician offices. But depending on who your provider is, you'll be able to talk with them and determine what type of functional testing is best for you and whether or not hormone replacement therapy is your first step, or there's some other steps that need to come before it, like foundational nutrition, maybe gut testing. Like, those are a lot of things that need to be looked at before we just jump right onto hormone replacement therapy. When you are proposed that option, know that your body's not failing you. It is not failing. It's maybe not doing its optimal job right now, but it's not failing and it's not a shortcut. And hopefully it's not the first step. But we want to make sure before it's the first step that your body is or is not able to produce hormones anymore on its own. That's a key factor. So sometimes it will be a first step if your body's just not able, like, and that functional testing will give you that information. But we do consider hormone replacement therapy quicker if the person is having a debilitating lifestyle pattern, such as they're not sleeping like at all, they just wake up every hour, that's also a sign of low progesterone, by the way. Extreme anxiety, extreme mood changes or shifts, extreme anger, they're not responding to lifestyle and diet changes, or if they have debilitating hot flashes that are impacting their daily performance. So those are some of the reasons that we would move more quickly towards hormone replacement therapy versus trying a lot of the other more subtle support system changes as a first line resort. I mentioned earlier that in the past that hormone replacement therapy was different, and it is, and I want you to really, really understand that, because you're probably getting some information, if you're fearful, from people who have only heard that in the past. And those hormones were synthetic. They were not identical human hormone products. They were actually being manufactured from horses, from equine therapy. They did not match a woman's natural body structure. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't really feel like a female horse most days. So their metabolism, their clearance is different than ours. So as a result, those products were causing more inflammation, more clotting risk, more risk of female-based cancers, and more risk of female heart disease and heart issues. But today, when hormone replacement therapy, or HRT for short, you'll probably hear us start saying that through this presentation, we're using bioidentical hormones, hormones that are molecularly designed identical to our human body, a female human body, and we process them differently. And when they are effectively monitored, managed, and tested and changed as the body changes, I will usually start out suggesting that women check their hormones every 3 months, like 90 days. We're just going 90 days checking, 90 days checking until we achieve consistent balance. Then we'll spread it out just a little bit longer. But it's in the beginning, it's a lot of work, but it's because we want to make sure that we're always giving you the right dose and not just, for lack of a better term, sticking a pellet in you and letting you go a year. A lot of people ask me about pellet therapy. Not a fan. I don't know how the other providers here are going to feel about it, but I've seen not so great results. First of all, they build up scar tissue and then they start to fall out, and they're not actually time released through the whole time they're in you. So I see a lot of more roller coastering effect, which is the exact reason the woman came to you to begin with, because she felt crazy up and down. So I prefer oral, transdermal, the topicals, those types of things as a first line. And again, we would really want to make sure we're testing the gut before we start doing oral therapies, but there are sublingual, under your tongue, and topical creams that we could also use as well. I always like to start with the lowest effective dose. That's another way that holistic differs, is that the medical physicians that I've seen, when they come to me, my patients, or they're put on the max dose day one. They're just given like the full dose of where they think they need to be day one. Do you want to talk about make a woman feel crazy? Bring her from 0 to all the way in one day. It's a lot. It's a whole lot. So my approach is a lot more gradual, because we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to rebuild overnight. We're certainly not going to take years to rebuild, but it's not going to just be days either. So we're going to use the lowest effective dose with ongoing reassessment. We're going to make sure we're supporting your liver, your adrenals, your gut, your nervous system, so that when problems may potentially arise, we know how to support your body's ability to detox. We know how to help you manage your stress. We know how to be managing your thyroid health, because your hormones don't work in isolation, right? There's not one that works without the balance of the other. So hormone replacement therapy shouldn't work in isolation either. So just know that that is one of the most reassuring ways to me to know that a client has walked to my door, that they're seeing a good provider, is that they tell me that their doctor is looking at all the things. They're talking about their diet, they're talking about their lifestyle, and they're talking about their adrenals and their thyroid and other things that support the hormone building process. And they're aware of the fact that when one goes wrong, all goes wrong. They're looking at their insulin, their blood sugar regulation. So that is how I know that that's a good sign of a good provider. And if that's not the care you're getting, I would strongly encourage you to check out the practitioners in the Natural Health Network, because we have very vetted practitioners to help you choose a really good practitioner that's looking at all the things. So in closing, I just want to summarize that perimenopause is not actually a decline, it's a recalibration. We are recalibrating our system. Our hormones are not our enemies. Our goal is cooperation in this recalibration, and that we don't need to suffer in silence. There's definitely help out there for you. You don't have to rush into a treatment decision. Your hormones did not get this way overnight. So take your time, do your research. And when hormone therapy is used respectfully, thoughtfully, supported by functional insight, it can be a powerful bridge into a new season of life. And instead of trying to fix yourself, ask yourself, what's my body trying to tell me? Reframe that. It is really important that your mind stays reframed, that you're not broken, that you're not falling apart. You're just readjusting. You're becoming a new person, a new mature woman in a new season of life. And you can certainly not outrun, out supplement, or out medicate poor nourishment. And because food is our foundation, our next speaker, Renata Trebing, she's going to launch into a beautiful discussion on how to support your body with food. So thank you so much, everybody. Please enjoy our next speaker, Renata Trebing.
Thank you so much, Wendy. It's so lovely to be here. Like Wendy mentioned, my name is Renata Trebing. I'm a certified nutrition and hormone coach, and I specialize in helping women with their hormones through the powerful support of nutrition and food. And today, I'm going to be sharing with you the untold role of food in hormone balance. Now, for me, I've been through the gamut of hormonal issues as I was a teen and a young woman that went through very irregular cycles. I had very heavy periods. I didn't understand why I was experiencing such crazy mood swings, from intense rage to intense sadness and everything in between. For me, that was something that I didn't understand, and I went through much of my life actually on hormonal birth control as a method that I think a lot of women have been told will help to, quote, regulate their hormones. Now, this isn't necessarily true, as I later learned. And ultimately, when I came off of birth control, I ended up having a lot of issues conceiving children. So after going through rounds of IVF, that was how I was able to successfully become pregnant, but it actually never got to the root cause of why I was experiencing literally decades of hormonal imbalance symptoms. Things like the heavy periods, the PMS, or PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which relates to a lot of the emotional changes that I was experiencing. In addition, I had the fertility challenges. I also experienced intense fatigue and exhaustion. So although I was seeking medical help from traditional doctors at that time, nothing was really helping me to get to the real reason why I was feeling and experiencing the things that I was. What's really interesting was that was when I started to dive into taking control of my own hormonal health. I did hours and hours of research. I read papers, I experimented on myself with something that was very surprising to most people, and that was my nutrition. Now, I was someone that went from literally thinking that my hormones were broken to becoming the woman now who is able to regulate her cycles for many years now, completely naturally, and also being able to conceive naturally my fourth child at 39 years old, an age in which most people will say it is very difficult to become pregnant naturally. So I myself have seen the power of how food can help to nourish our bodies, nourish our hormones, and give us back that hormonal balance that we really have been seeking. So having said all that, what I want you to remember here when we speak about the untold role of nutrition when it comes to hormone balance is that our hormones are not random, and they're definitely not rebellious in any way. They are actually just responding. They're responding to our environment. They're responding to the foods that we eat. And so when we think about this time of year, January, when so many people are jumping on New Year's resolutions, many times for weight loss, especially for us as women, what they often think about is a lot of control or restriction when it comes to their food. And what I want you to remember here is the food that we eat is information for our hormones to respond. And your body is always responding to what you are giving it. So, how does food communicate with our hormones? This is the key part that I think many people misunderstand. Hormones are made from nutrients. Proteins, which we can find in animal sources like beef, chicken, or fish, or even in non-animal sources like beans and legumes, proteins in general are our building blocks for hormones. We also need to make sure that we're actually getting enough healthy fats. Healthy fats help us to create the estrogen and progesterone that Wendy mentioned. It also is vital to the production of cortisol in our bodies. Now, cortisol gets a little bit of a bad rap, but really cortisol is necessary for some human functions. We just get into a little bit of trouble if we have too much cortisol for too long in our bodies. We also need carbohydrates. Now, I know so many people that are afraid of eating carbohydrates because they have been demonized for so long in our society, but we do need carbs. They are essential for our thyroid function and for actually signaling ovulation to occur. So, like I mentioned, hormones are impacted by our nutrition. And it also is very important to those detoxification pathways that were mentioned earlier, especially with that hormone estrogen, which is so important to our health. We also know that we want to make sure our blood sugar levels are regulated too. And much of this can happen through the food choices that we have at every single meal. If our blood sugar levels are not regulated, then it can spike cortisol, which will actually cause that lovely hormone progesterone to become more imbalanced. So all of that to say, when your nutrition is off, then your hormones will become more imbalanced, which may lead to things like increased PMS, perhaps even more cravings for salty or sugary foods, and also irregular cycles. So what I love for people to remember, especially at this time of year, is when we're looking at our food and looking at our meals, every single meal is a way to support your body with hormonal balance. Or it can tell you information about what your body actually needs to compensate for any hormonal imbalances. And this is a great way to start talking about the menstrual cycle. So for me, the menstrual cycle is something that is so admonished in our culture today because I know so many women. Even yesterday, I had a woman texting me saying that her cycle was so bad and she hated it. But when we actually learn to understand our menstrual cycle, whether we're having regular cycles in our reproductive years or as we're getting into perimenopause, I like to think of this as our monthly hormonal report card. It is telling us so much information about what food our bodies need to help to regulate hormones. So let's dive into the 4 phases of the female menstrual cycle. And I'll also tell you a little bit about what's going on hormonally, as well as the foods that we can eat to support our hormones in that phase. So first things first, we most often recognize the menstruation phase. This is when we're actively bleeding. Now, during this phase, we also see that our energy levels and oftentimes our mood drops quite a lot. And that is because our estrogen and progesterone are at their lowest levels throughout the entire cycle. During the menstruation phase, we want to make sure that we get plenty of iron since we're obviously losing blood through the period. So looking at red meat can be a great option for those of us that eat meat. Or if you want to go with a vegan or vegetarian route, looking at those dark leafy greens paired with a vitamin C rich food will help to improve the absorption of that plant-based iron. Also, something that can be really helpful is warming foods. Those warming foods help to stimulate blood flow to our gut system, and that can also be very helpful, especially if you're feeling lots of cramping during this particular phase. After the period ends, we move into what's called the follicular phase. This is when you'll likely feel your energy levels start to increase, as well as your mood. And this is because estrogen is starting to rise. Now, our brain and estrogen need carbohydrates and protein. So we want to make sure we're getting carbohydrates for fuel into our muscles and protein to help to regulate our blood sugar levels. This is a great way to ensure that you're eating enough protein at every meal. And generally speaking, I like to recommend between 25 to 40 grams of protein at each meal. After the follicular phase is the ovulatory phase. So this is very obvious because we're ovulating. An egg has been released from the follicle, and this is the prime time to potentially become pregnant if that is what you desire. Now, during this time, this is when antioxidants and minerals are the most supportive for egg quality. So if you are wanting to become pregnant, making sure you're getting lots of antioxidant-rich foods, such as berries. They're some of my favorites because they're also high in fiber and low in sugar, but also ensuring you're getting plenty of minerals through your food or perhaps through supplementation. That can also be a fantastic way to ensure egg quality continues to improve. And then lastly, we are in the luteal phase. This is roughly the week or more before your period begins. And this is when we typically see an increase in progesterone until the body recognizes that it is not pregnant, and then progesterone will drop off. Now, during this particular phase, we are much more sensitive to stress. And this stress can be things like work stress, relationship stress, etc., but it can also be due to blood sugar changes. Now, myself and many other women might experience increased cravings for sugary foods during this time, and that is very normal because our bodies are telling us, hey, I need some extra support through nourishment to help me to make sure my blood sugar levels don't drop as much. So my tips here are to make sure that you're having sufficient protein at your meal and also sufficient fiber. So fiber is really fantastic. It comes from all different kinds of plant foods. So fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, and especially with high fiber vegetables, known as cruciferous vegetables, they can be really fantastic for aiding detoxification, which is essential during our entire cycle, but also to help us to regulate blood sugar levels too. And so cruciferous vegetables are things like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale is one of my favorites. We also want to make sure we're getting lots of magnesium. Magnesium helps to relax muscles in the body, can be really helpful for cramping. And then also remember your metabolism increases during the luteal phase. And so we want to make sure we're eating enough food. You'll usually experience a little bit more hunger during this time. So studies have shown that we need about 238 additional calories each day during that particular phase. So don't worry if your hunger is increasing. One of the things I love to talk about is that for us as women, we work on that full cycle calendar. We're not the same person every single day. And so it's okay that your hunger levels change because that is how your body's telling you you need something to support your hormone levels. Okay, I know we have lots of questions in the chat, which is so great. So I want to make sure that I'm going back to answer some of these questions. So I know that there was a question about warming foods, and Angela, thank you so much. I love bone broth as well. It's so incredible in terms of a warm food, so temperature wise. It's also fantastic for gut health, which Angela will be talking to later on. And I also really like it because you get lots of additional anti-inflammatories in that particular very simple drink. You can also add bone broth to soups or stews, which with the coming weather could be a really great option. Or I like to sip it warmed up, perhaps with a little bit of lemon or turmeric infused into it as well. Okay, now let's see. What if you are vegan? So I think Leah was asking this question. We may have been talking about protein at that particular time. So we have lots of different choices for proteins as a vegan. And so I mentioned beans and legumes, things like edamame or tofu, if they're organic, non-GMO, et cetera, that can be really supportive for some women. Those are the things that I would focus on in addition to lentils. And of course, if you like protein powders, that could also be another option to add additional protein to what you're eating on a daily basis. Wendy had some awesome options here for the follicular phase. Definitely go ahead and I'll read that out loud for anyone watching the replay because I want to make sure everybody gets this information. So in the follicular phase, warm grounding foods like soups, stews, and curries. I love a curry because it usually has a high amount of turmeric, which is another anti-inflammatory. Nutrient-dense foods like lentils, eggs, whole grains. I happen to love quinoa because it is a higher protein, almost like a carb. We also have brown rice, which has more fiber. Lean proteins, chicken, fish, shellfish. Healthy fats, my favorites are avocado. And then also I happen to love seeds, so flax seeds, pumpkin seeds. I also really love all these warming spices that Wendy mentioned, ginger, turmeric, and cinnamon. They are fantastic to add into almost any sweet or savory thing. And then we talked about, Jackie has a great question about magnesium. So there's all different kinds of magnesium. There's about 7 different forms of magnesium. And the key here is finding the type that works for you. That's why I love this question. So for magnesium, there is something called magnesium glycinate or bisglycinate. Those are the most absorbable forms of magnesium. So I usually like to start with that as a general guideline. But depending on the individual, we obviously want to be looking at their hormone levels first. And also, if you're looking at it in particular for sleep, you might start off with magnesium, those 2 magnesiums that we had mentioned. But there are some supplements available right now that combine all different kinds of magnesiums. And so while I'd love to provide you, Jackie, with a very personalized answer, this could be something that would be great to follow up with offline. Okay, so we've been talking all about the cycle, loved all of the questions, keep them coming, this is fantastic. But most of all, remember, we're changing, our hormones are changing every single day of our cycle, which means our nourishment needs to be able to adjust to that every single day too. I wanted to make sure we talked about why nutrition is the first, but often the most missed treatment. And that is, in my opinion, because of diet culture and this idea that everything needs to be a quick fix. So for me, especially during the New Year's resolution timeframe, I'm always looking at women to encourage them to stop eating less, but to eat more in a nourishing way. When we restrict our hormones significantly, or when we restrict our nutrition significantly, it really does have an impact to our hormone levels. And that is when we start to see things like increased PMS symptoms, increased perimenopausal symptoms. We might even start missing cycles entirely if we're in our reproductive years. And I really impress upon women that we need to be tuning into our bodies, listening to our hunger levels, listening to and paying attention to the types of foods that have the most impact on how we feel. Because instead of just saying, oh, I'm eating low carb or I'm only eating 1 meal a day, I really want women to feel into what is the way of eating that helps me to feel my best. Now, just like it was mentioned earlier, supplements are a great way to continue to support the body as it heals. And the idea here is it is a supplement. It can't replace foundational nourishment. And lastly, if you're under a significant amount of stress or you are significantly restricting for some reason, this can absolutely cancel out any amount of clean eating that you have been doing thus far. So we have to make sure we're thinking about your stress levels, your nervous system, which has a huge impact on how well your body is processing the foods that you're eating. So the reason why nutrition works so powerfully as that first step is because it supports the root level of hormonal creation and signaling. It also builds resilience before we start any protocol or any testing or any supplementation. And my favorite thing is to think about my nutrition as a form of self-care that we get to do multiple times a day. We get to choose the foods that we eat. We get to potentially cook the foods that we love, and we get to feel our best when we do so. So in this time of year where it's so easy to feel like I need to eat the same every single day, and if I don't, then I've fallen off the wagon and I just need more willpower, it's actually not about that. It's about nourishing your body. So Hormonal balance doesn't come from necessarily doing more and more things. It comes from choosing specifically and intentionally the exact nutrition to support your body properly. What I want to come up with next is how you can use food as step one of your hormone communication system. We want to make sure that you know where you're at in your cycle, whether you're in your reproductive years or if you're getting into perimenopause. And we want to be able to pinpoint what are your exact symptoms that you're experiencing and when during your cycle. From here, we can then help you to determine what are the exact foods that will help you to support hormone balance. And I have an incredible freebie that I'll be sharing with everyone here. I'll pop it into the chat, which is the exact foods that you can eat in every phase of your cycle. These foods have been so transformative for all of my clients because they've seen the ease and the power of making little shifts in every phase to help them to feel better. And that is honestly one of the best things that you can do every single day. How can you choose one food to help to support your hormones in the phase of the cycle that you're in? All in all, I want to make sure that you know that with myself and any of the practitioners on the call today, we are here to help you and we're here to listen. We want to hear what are the symptoms that you're experiencing, where you're at in your cycle, and where you want to be in your health and hormone journey. So be sure to use food as that first step, as that hormone communication system, because it's true. And I have seen this in my own life, as well as in the lives of all the women that I specifically have helped. With the right foods, hormone balance does become possible, and you can feel your best that you've ever felt with this one simple step to start off with. Okay, I loved all the questions. Thank you so much for that. And now we get to move into a real area of health that I think is potentially very confusing, but once you learn this from Angela, you will see your gut health in a totally different way. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait for you to hear all the incredible things and see the diagrams that she's put together because that blew my mind. So welcome to the stage, Angela.
Thank you so much. So guys, welcome. Thanks for your time today. I am Dr. Angela and I'm a chiropractor here in Virginia, but I helped basically start a business called the Gut Girls with my colleague, Diana, who's in Tennessee. And we're able through that business to see patients in all 50 states, which is amazing because when you hear what the women like Wendy and Renata have talked about so far, it's such a need to get women educated about their bodies and about their health. And so something I want to start with that you might be asking right now after listening to Wendy and Renata is what if you are the woman on here that's like, but I feel like I'm doing all the things right and I'm still not getting where I want to get, because those are the clients and the patients that typically come to us at the Gut Girls is the woman who's like, I'm doing all the right eating. I've gotten my labs done, as Wendy has said, and they're all normal. My diet couldn't be any cleaner. And I just feel like I'm not getting anywhere. And I'm frustrated. I'm beyond frustrated, physically, emotionally. And what we typically see this female look like is somewhere in their 30s to 40s to 50s, where if you guys can relate, it's that woman that comes and I look and feel like I'm pregnant all the time. I've got this constant bloat around the abdomen. My clothes no longer fit me. And no matter what I do, it does not go away. And so I'm speaking directly to that woman today to let you know, as what has already been said, is your body is definitely not broken. There is nothing wrong with you. But what I want to remind you, and I think that this is so important, is when, as you see here, even when the labs are normal, what is the root cause, even beyond that, that I want to educate and hone you in on? So can we see the next slide? And I'm going to jump into that. And that's going to be the gut. Okay, so I want to remind you guys that I think it was mentioned from Wendy is hormones, what they do is they actually react to the world around you. So when you're wondering, okay, what is going on in my body? Why do I look pregnant all the time? Why am I so bloated? And my mood is everywhere and I'm miserable. To pull back a little bit and be reminded that it might just be the way that you have shown up in the world. Let's say you're in your 40s. So let's say over the past 40 years. And when we look at the gut, it actually tells us a deeper story, and it really helps explain a little bit more about your nervous system. And this is why it doesn't necessarily show up on labs, because as Wendy said, the lab ranges were actually built on male physiology. And so they don't actually tell us what is going on in a woman who is layers deep with holding on to emotional tension in her life or trauma tension in her life. And that's where the gut will reveal this. And so your gut plays a huge role in hormonal balance, given that one, we need nutrients to create hormones, but two, even if we're eating all the right nutrients, if our gut is unhealthy, we're not actually absorbing all of those nutrients, the beautiful food that Renata just talked about, to then make the hormones that we need to respond how we want to respond to the world around us. It's that woman that says, I want to show up differently in the world, and I just can't. I don't actually have the capacity, although I view myself differently. I cannot show up the way I want to show up in the world. And that is because there, as Wendy talked about, there's a deeper depletion going on in the gut. And the reason that the labs also don't show this, guys, is labs show you a snapshot in time. So if I went and got my blood drawn right now in this very moment, you're going to see how I'm responding to the world around me at this very moment in time. And the body is so beautifully built to actually compensate very well and keep blood levels normal, because the body is, its job is for you to survive. So if blood levels are not normal and regulated, you're not going to survive, right? So the body will pull from other places that are actually below the blood level to then make the blood levels regulated. So that's why we go to the gut, because what's below the blood levels is the gut. And that's typically where the body has pulled from under stress response and trauma response to help make the blood levels normal. So it's like the secret, like that your people most likely aren't looking at beyond the blood levels. So remember that the gut is where you break down food. It's where you have hormone building and nutrients. And we want to be able to see all of that, which is why I love, thank you for going to the next slide. I absolutely love to use the GI map test. So this is where Renata started us off really good. And I hope you guys are taking notes that you want to start with nutrition first, because this is also where most women will come to us and say, I got a test done, but now I'm completely overwhelmed with all the steps I have to take to make a change in this test. And most of you guys on this call have probably been there. Even when you find something wrong, it's too overwhelming to take the first step forward to make a change. That is where you want to start with what Renata talked about, which is start with the food. And that way, when we do any kind of testing like the GI map, we get a very clear picture of the root cause and not all the other things that are basically, let's say, crowding out that root cause problem. So for instance, if you are eating a standard American diet, I guarantee what we're going to see on the GI map is lots of inflammation. So think about it as like a fire, right? Think of inflammation as fire. Before we get to maybe some bacterial overgrowth or some parasites or pathogens that are overgrowing, the first job is you have to put out the inflammation anyways. You have to put out the fire anyways. So don't waste your time and money on a test if you haven't put in those foundational steps of nutrition. But like I said, if you are the female that is, hey, I've been doing very clean eating and I'm still having symptoms, that is where the GI map comes in handy. And as you see some of the markers on here, I don't actually think people understand the difference between the GI map is a DNA stool test versus just a cultural stool test that you'll get at your doctor's office. And even most gastroenterologists, they're going to run basically just a pathogen panel, which is looking for C. diff, E. coli, maybe Salmonella, Yersinia. These are pathogens that they're looking for because research tells us exactly what to do with C. diff, right? Like research is, this is a problem. If we find it, let's treat it. Whereas if you do a test like the GI map, it's DNA. So we're actually getting to see DNA of bacteria in the body. So that is different. And it's not just pathogens. As you can see here, it's things like H. pylori. We actually get to see your good bacteria on a GI map. So funny enough, I'm the woman who's I've already taken the probiotic for years and I'm still constipated, or I'm still bloated, or I still have diarrhea. When you take a look at the GI map, you actually get to know the very specific probiotic that your body needs. And it blows my mind how much just that little piece of information can actually change a woman's appearance of how she shows up in the world, mentally, emotionally, physically, is just identifying the probiotic that you need. And then beyond just probiotics, we also get to see things like pathogens and parasites, which no one wants to talk about, but they are there. And I will also say this, the beauty of the GI map is, to be honest, I'm a fan. I'm a chiropractor, so I love to do the things naturally. And I have 2 girls, to let them get out in the world and get their hands muddy. We have a lot of friends here in Virginia that live on farms, so we'll go visit their farm animals. And yeah, that's a really good way to actually introduce your body and your family to parasites. We should never not have let's say it this way, we're always going to come in contact or be exposed with parasites. So for the body to take on a parasite is actually normal. What's not normal is when your body starts to harbor those parasites in your GI tract. And what we get to see on the GI map is, why is your body holding on to that parasite rather than letting it be transient and your immune system actually fighting it off? And it goes back to a lack of nutrient absorption. There's either a gut lining that has declined and we're not getting the nutrients from the foods that we're eating, or it's that we're eating all this inflammatory food. And so our immune system is too busy fighting off that battle versus trying to get a parasite out of the GI tract. And then some of the other markers here I want to talk about are things like staph and strep. So these are very common exposures in the world, but when you see them on a GI map, it actually can tell you about your pH balance. So pH is whether you have high stomach acid, low stomach acid. Some people say, am I more alkaline or acidic? When you start to see certain bacteria grow on the GI map, you actually can understand where your pH level is and what you need to do to help that. And spoiler alert, it's not always just, like Renata said, supplementation. Sometimes it's an actual change in your lifestyle, because like she talked about with cortisol, which a reminder, that is your body's stress hormone. So when cortisol rises all the time, we actually cannot make stomach acid at the same time that cortisol is rising in the body. Those 2 pathways cannot exist together very well. So if you are constantly in this fight or flight, running from a bear mode, your pH balance is going to change. Your stomach acid is going to drop. And right there, even if you're eating the finest diet, you're not going to be able to break down the protein and the fiber that you need. Hence, the woman who is walking around like she's 9 months pregnant all the time. She's eating the right foods, but she's not breaking them down. So you really get this very individualized look. And I also want to say, with calprotectin, which I have here, it is a marker well known in the GI world for inflammation and is commonly linked to things like irritable bowel disease. So when we get to see some of these huge, well-known, well-researched markers on the GI map, we get to know so much about not just where you are currently. This is the difference between blood work and the GI map or your gut, is when this marker is elevated, it typically can also tell us about a response to the world around you. Like IBS is commonly known to be linked to some kind of trauma in a woman's body. And what's interesting about the gut, so I'm a chiropractor here in Virginia, and I will tell you, a lot of women come into my office with low back pain. What's so fascinating about that is when you actually get to listen to them, I think Wendy said women are mostly the quickest to be dismissed. When you actually get to listen to them, it's not usually like a physical pain. It's something deeper than that. It's something she's been holding on to for years emotionally, and it shows up in the pelvis. The pelvis is like the #1 area that trauma shows up in women. So that can affect your menstrual cycle, like Renata was talking about. That can mimic low back pain. That can mimic hormonal pain. But really being able to put the whole picture together and see the woman for who she is and really get to know her story, that's where you're going to get answers. And the GI map helps you do that. Go ahead and jump to the next slide. So what I really want you to take away from this is I do want you to realize that through nutrition and then adding in the functional testing like a GI map, you can come to know your body in an entirely different way, because the gut is the second brain. So again, the gut tells you how you are perceiving the world around you. Are you showing up in a nervous system that is on overdrive mode? If you are, we typically see an inflammatory pattern on the GI map. Are you a woman showing up in shutdown mode? Typically, we see that on the GI map as a gut lacking pattern. Or are you a woman showing up in disconnection mode, complete collapse mode? Typically, we see that as digestive dysfunction on the GI map. So it's so awesome to see these patterns that have been well researched, studied, actually be able to give you something beyond just a diagnosis. Yes, we want to know if there's something medically there. So we want a diagnosis, but a diagnosis, here's what's so interesting, and I want you to take this home. It doesn't actually tell you more than this is what you are in a manual. I call it the Merck manual because that's what we study in school as doctors, but that's what you are in the Merck manual. But when you get to see your gut and you get to see your pattern, we get to see who you actually are and what's been driving this over years. So we get to see your reactive response, and the GI map can help you be, instead of reactive, actually more preventative and responsive to the world around you, feeling at ease in your body, having that balanced hormonal status that we're all trying to achieve, and be able to rest and reset. I remember I worked back in Texas early in my career, and I remember women would come into my office and we would kind of laugh, but like it's really not funny, because Wendy said this beautifully, is we'd be like, look at us, we're burning through our hormones. Literally, we're trying to keep up with the world around us. We're trying to manage everything. And a lot of times we're dismissed. And so we are literally just burning through our hormones. And the GI map actually can reveal that, which is so amazing, to connect your gut to your hormones, because for some of you, you might be blown away that you even need to consider your gut when your hormones have gone awry. And then you can go to the last slide. So the big takeaway, because I do want you guys to have very actionable steps. I love what Renata kicked off of. Here's where you start, so that you don't leave here totally confused with, I learned all this information and now I just feel even more overwhelmed. So once you've started with, I think Renata's handout that's in the chat, you want to then check downstream. And that could be the gut. That's typically the next starting point. And so this is where you can get to the root cause a lot faster. This is where you can get those sustained results, because it's not just, if you do get a GI map, let's say from another provider, and you leave that consultation with like 20 supplements because there was 20 markers high on your GI map, also probably not accurate, because you can't just supplement your way out of bad gut health. You actually need lifestyle accountability and changes, nutritional changes. I'll mention one thing, because I think this is where people get stuck. You want to nourish your body. So when you look at a GI map, and what we try to do with the Gut Girls is, it's not like, hey, your stool test showed this, so you need to eliminate all of these foods and never come back and eat them again. That is not true, because then you end up on a limited diet and you really do become depleted over years. So when you're working with a provider, you want to make sure that if something has to be eliminated, that it is eliminated for a brief time, almost like a 12, maybe 8 to 12 week little intervention step of, hey, let's say your body does show on a GI map that you are highly sensitive to gluten. Okay, just to bring the inflammation down and get the fire put out, you might just have to lower the consecutive day in and day out consumption of gluten. Or for some women, you might have to eliminate that, but it's for such a short time. Typically, you can change the gut lining and bring down calprotectin, which is the fire marker, in 12 weeks. So you want to make sure as you go into using labs that you're not walking out with 20 supplements and you're not walking out with this extreme diet. You want it to serve you in all factors. So I hope that this helps you guys understand the next step, how to understand the GI map, how to get the most out of it, what it's really telling you. And then when you work with a provider, what to expect when you're working with them when it comes to connecting the gut and the hormonal health. So also what I was going to do too is, so if you guys are starting with Renata's handout, I will put in the chat what we have at the Gut Girls, which is a free 6 basics guide that you can get off our website. You can download it for free. But what it's going to do is teach you how to just be consistent with some of these lifestyle changes. So you're already doing Renata's nutrition. Then you want to see how are you consistent with some of these lifestyle changes to make them a new rhythm of being, a new rhythm of life for you that feels good and is nourishing. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope this was helpful. And I think Renata is actually going to jump back on. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Renata.
Thanks so much, Angela. And I love that in the chat, people were saying how much they loved your slides. So great job there. So we've talked about nutrition. We've talked about the gut. Now we get to talk about advanced modalities for deeper healing. And I'm speaking today on behalf of Buhai. Buhai is a health and wellness clinic that focuses on holistic as well as traditional remedies to aid with helping all of us get to the root cause of whatever we might be experiencing. So what is the purpose of some of the advanced lab testing that I'll talk about today? What we use this particular testing for is not just to do random testing for testing's sake. What we want to use these lab tests for is to help to continue to identify the root causes when someone is already doing all the right nutrition, when they know that they have been on this journey for a while, but something is still a little bit off. That's when we start to go to many of the advanced tests that I'll talk about next that are specifically helpful with our hormones. The first is called the Dutch test. Now, you may have heard of this word, Dutch, and what it is a comprehensive hormone assessment to help to look at hormonal patterns, not just levels. What I love about the Dutch test is we get to look at all different kinds of hormones in the body, as well as cortisol. So this is a fantastic one to get a deeper dive into how your body is fluctuating hormonally throughout an entire day. We love to recommend Dutch tests for women that might be experiencing symptoms that seem to not be alleviating, especially when it comes to their menstrual cycle or perimenopause. This helps us to give a more broad look at how your hormones are occurring or changing throughout the course of a 24-hour day. And it really helps to influence how we develop your personalized care plan. In addition, Dr. Angela also spoke about the GI map. We love the GI map because it does help us to identify gut infections, dysbiosis, and any inflammation that might be contributing to your systemic issues. Another one that a lot of people talk to me about is food sensitivities. So we also do food sensitivity testing, and this helps us to identify the foods that are causing you inflammation on various levels. This can also help to influence how you will use this information over the next 8 to 12 weeks in order to, like Dr. Angela said, reduce that fire of inflammation and allow the body to start to heal itself. We love to look at inflammation on that cellular level, not just in terms of how your immune system is very quickly reacting to what's being put in your body. And then an additional deeper dive assessment that we do that I think is very often under discussed, but is so helpful for us as women, is methylation and genetic testing. So with this testing, we review 5 key genes that actually impact how well your body detoxifies. And as we mentioned before, if those detox pathways are impaired or you're not clearing things out of your body effectively, this will stall your healing, and it can also mean an exacerbation of your symptoms. So those are a few tests that we have available at Buhai. And in addition to that, we have some micronutrient and antioxidant assessments. So what's different about this testing is it tells us what nutrients and antioxidants your body responds the best to. So we've seen examples where different patients' lab tests on micronutrients and antioxidants will come back and it will tell us this particular body responds better to something like milk thistle versus vitamin C. And what's incredible about this testing is that means that your precise care plan can then be worked into things like the incredible IV infusions that we have at Buhai, or wellness injections, or even supplement protocols. It all gets to be finely tuned based upon what your body actually responds to. So the goal here is efficiency and effectiveness and not guesswork. Now, in addition to these labs, Buhai also offers many of the traditional labs that you've likely seen with your traditional doctor, like the CBC, CMP, hemoglobin, A1C. All of those things are absolutely within the realm of traditional lab testing. But what we do at Buhai is that we interpret these lab tests in context with everything that we're seeing in your lab work and in your lifestyle. This collaboration and deeper analysis really helps us to see the patterns that many times are missed in standard lab test reviews. Now, the thing that makes Buhai a holistic wellness clinic is that we don't only look at lab work, we actually look at lab work as one piece of the puzzle, because we know that healing is not just biochemical, it's also neurological and it's emotional. So we also make sure that we talk to every single patient about their past medical experience. If they have any traumas or fears related to medical care, which for me and so many women have definitely been something we've experienced, or even certain beliefs about what's possible for their health. This is where the nervous system regulation piece comes in and is truly essential to deeper healing. So with things like health anxiety or fear of different procedures, or even distrust of what your body is doing, all of the nursing staff and doctors at Buhai help to listen to you, listen to your stories, listen to your symptoms, rather than admonishing them or ignoring them. What's great about Francine Sims and the other nursing staff at Buhai is they are equipped to be able to help you to regulate your nervous system and build safety and trust in the process without continuing on with fear that could actually inhibit your healing process in general. Now, the reason why I'm talking about Buhai today is because both Francine Sims, our head nurse at Buhai, and myself, we have joined forces because we saw a gap in the industry, a gap that needs to be filled with hormone therapy that is natural and effective. And so we have coined the term natural hormone therapy protocols. So this has been designed for women that may be dealing with a variety of hormonal issues, such as PCOS, endometriosis, infertility or pregnancy loss, if you're transitioning off of the birth control pills, if you're preparing for fertility or pregnancy, if you're in perimenopause, pre or post-menopause. What is included in the protocols for women that are going through the various changes in our lives affected by hormones is that we combine all of the best to be able to create a care plan that is effective for you. So we combine coaching as well as education. We also provide many of the holistic modalities that Buhai offers, such as the IV infusions and wellness shots that I've already mentioned, but also things like ozone therapy. We even look at photobiomodulation, also known as red light therapy, and various peptides. So peptides are often housed under the Ozempic or Ozempic type injections. And whilst there are a lot of misconceptions, there are absolutely places where these type of peptide injections can be incredibly helpful for healing. And this is new research coming out over the last couple of years that have shown that microdosing of peptides can be very beneficial. So all that being said is what is incredible about Buhai is we bring everything together to create a customized plan for you based upon lab work, so the deeper hormonal dives such as the Dutch test or even the micronutrient or antioxidant assessment panels. We look at your symptoms, we listen to your story, and we help you to be ready to improve your health and happiness. So just like everyone has mentioned, Wendy, Angela, myself, the thing is that the body does not work in isolated systems. It works as a whole. So if one system is off, then the other symptoms will compensate until symptoms appear or get progressively worse. So everything that I mentioned today that Buhai offers in conjunction with my support as a nutritional coach that specializes in healing is to help you to be supported and to accelerate your hormonal healing. These are not quick fixes. And they are incredibly effective when you show up with consistency, when you know the lifestyle integration to help you to plan for your success, as well as regulating your nervous system for safety. So with myself, Francine, and all of the staff at Boo High Health, our role is really to be the catalyst to help your body to heal itself. And I'm delighted that we have a very special offer available at Boo High currently until the end of the month, which is if you do order lab testing through us, you do receive a free 15-minute nutritional consultation with myself and Francine, our head nurse. And this is an incredible way to start to understand all of the things that we've talked about from the nutrition side and from the Boo High side and how that can come together to support your healing. So next up, we have Brianna. She is such a powerhouse when it comes to brain health and how our hormonal changes can affect our brain as well. So take it away.
Thank you. That was so nice. I'm Brianna. I am the assistant director here at Houston Brain Center. And the easiest way to describe our magical powerhouse, as I like to call it, is that we love and educate all things brain, both on the physiological level. So when it comes to the structures of the brain and how that can be influenced by different things, and then also on the mental health level. So obviously, not everything can just be CBT or talk therapied out, right? When we talk about symptoms or things like that, especially if there is more of a physiological or a metabolic or hormonal issue. So our goal is to really get to the root of that issues and try to figure out, okay, now how can all these things be attacked at a multidisciplinary approach instead of just focusing on the symptoms of it. You can go to the first slide. Mental health symptoms are usually looked at as just psychological phenomenons, right? So kind of similar to what Angela said, you have your book, you're in school, and that's what they teach us. And around there is a piece of that helps, but what it's not looking at as the whole person, right? The person and their medical history, their genetic history, their DNA, their RNA, like all these things that really make up the whole person can't just be, quite frankly, fragmented into a sentence. It's so much more than just you check off this list, you have this, especially in such a fast-paced society where we are exposed to different things that I feel like a lot of people are like, when I was a kid, we didn't have this, And some of that is true. New things are coming about, but also like with more research and things like that, making ourselves aware that mental health is not just psychological. Like obviously the symptoms can mimic a psychological disorder or traits, but I would say probably 5, and I'm being modest here because I don't want to overquote, but probably 5 out of 10 patients that we see, it actually has nothing to do with the psychological issue. And it's more trying to figure out what's going on or medical gaslighting or just not feeling right. But I've been to a million specialists and doctors and something's just not right. And I know my body, but no one's listening to me. So again, bringing in the psychological structures with that side of the mental health of like feeling like has to be something wrong with me because I still feel off and no one's listening to me. So things that hormones can directly like modulate in the neurotransmitter system would be like serotonin, dopamine, GABA, norepinephrine, things like that. And so when the signaling is disrupted or impeded, your neurotransmitter systems can become obviously very dysregulated, which is normal, right? It's like anything else in the world, but where it becomes a step further when we think about the brain itself is that when you are dysregulated in your neurotransmitter system or your nervous system, that's when we have things labeled like anxiety, depression. People say, oh, you're just nervous, that's why your stomach hurts. I'm like, well, my stomach hurts as soon as I wake up. I'm not nervous as soon as I wake up. Maybe I am because something's coming up, but it's not just that. So the very dismissive things that women usually get, our mood, our focus, our sleep, emotional regulation, all those things are biologically driven. And then just to add in another caveat is when we think about things like cycle syncing, there's different things nutrition wise or lifestyle wise that we should be doing. Even if you're not menstruating, you still technically have a cycle. There's still a cycle where you do need more of these foods or you need to do more of these activities or more of this. That is still very applicable whether you're menstruating or not. And then my biggest driving force that I will die on a hill screaming to everybody about is how women in general, whether we're talking about the brain, your PCP, your GI, your endocrinologist, whatever it is, you could be talking to your neighbor or your husband, I don't know, or your kid, it can be anybody, but we are really treated for symptoms and not root causes, right? So we can put as many band-aids on as we want, but if we're not fixing the issue, we might as well buy a lifetime supply of band-aids, right? That's how you get things that need to be a continuous use. Like you legit need it because you didn't fix the root issue. So understanding the mental health and the biopsychosocial aspects allow you to identify what's actually happening. So when we think about the hormones that shape our mood and cognition, obviously things like estrogen, proestrogen, cortisol, and thyroid, which I'm sure we've all heard of these, but maybe not in the way that we're about to dive in. And yes, a life supply of band-aids. Things that we're about to jump into. We're gonna break it down super simple, but to where it does affect physiological brain structure versus brain lobes. So just a quick crash course on something that we specialize in here, being board certified neurotherapist. Dr. Morrow, she's awesome. She has her PhD in applied psychophysiology. So the blend of the structure of the brain and the functioning of the brain. So we like to say brain lobes and hormones are so interconnected. Hormones show up in structural systems like the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. It's deep within the structure, meaning it's always going to be there, but it may not show the symptoms until it's dysregulated. And then your hormones are actually showing what is dysregulated. So your brain is, I like to call it the master control center, or think about the only thing I probably remember from 9th grade biology, which is the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? I'm pretty sure that's stuck in everybody's head, but think about your brain like that. It literally is the control center and then goes on to the stomach, which is called the second brain. So when we think about estrogen, that influences our serotonin synthesis and our receptor sensitivity. So think of cognitive processing speed. And when we think about estrogen, that's not what we think about at all. But your processing speed, typically why during your menstrual cycle or your postpartum period or perimenopause, you have increased vulnerability or you feel more sensitive, or people are like, oh, it's your time of the month, or oh, Aunt Flo is visiting because you're so silly, or you're just going through menopause. That's why it's just one of those. Oh, your hormones are out of whack. Things people say to downplay how we're feeling or make a joke out of it. And yes, all those things can be true, but no, I'm still really struggling. Then think about proestrogen and the metabolite modulate of GABA and the receptors and the criticalness of the inhibitory control, or like the anxiety regulation. So a lot of people don't realize that, hey, your increased anxiety or your sleep disruptions or your emotional reactivity. So not just regulating your emotions, but how you react to certain situations. That's actually a hormonal thing as well. When you think about cortisol, which is I'm going to call it the word of the day because it affects so much of our body. And we usually just are like, oh, stress. Oh, you can't lose your pooch. It's the cortisol. Or you have a headache. It's the cortisol. The pooch is going to be here, but I would like it to be here because I need to work on it, not because of the cortisol. And so that is our stress response, but that's actually regulated through something we call the HPA axis. And that's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenaline axis. So again, structurally, where we can see changes in our hormones. Chronic cortisol elevations is also linked to hippocampal changes. So impaired emotional regulation or increased risk for depression. This is a biomarker that you can physically see when you get MRA or an EEG. If you have enlarged glands essentially within the pituitary adrenal axis, you probably are going to mimic some symptoms of depression or anxiety, and it could not be that. But if you go to a doctor who maybe they're not educated on the functionality or more holistic approach, and they see that, they're going to prescribe you that Prozac or that Clonopin, or they're going to just give you something to band-aid it, and it's actually not a psychological issue. It's structural, it's hormonal. And then things like thyroid. So when we think about thyroid, it's hypo or hyper, and we think about how that can affect, I'm really cold, it must be thyroid, or I'm dizzy. And so when you break down the thyroid hormone in general, away from all the things that we're taught or that we know, it supports the metabolic activity within the brain. So it actually influences your energy, your attention, your executive functioning. All that also shows up in the frontal lobe. So we can physically see your brain is not producing enough hertz, or it's producing too many hertz in your frontal lobe. There's some type of imbalance going on, and being able to have that piece of the diagnostic tool and breaking it down from there, we're able to see subclinical thyroid dysfunction that can manifest again as fatigue, cognitive slowing, or you're like, I just feel so like my brain is not on it today. I feel cognitively slow. I had a patient last week tell me that they feel like they took a bunch of propranolol, which is a beta blocker, meaning they are not firing rapid fire like they're used to. Also, it can be linked to depressive symptoms. So I always like to emphasize those. There's a million more. I can talk about this all day, but those are the four main ones that we look for when we are looking at the EEG and going ahead and quantifying it so that we can understand it, breaking it down to a level where if I hand you your report and I go over, you're actually understanding what it means, not just sending you a my chart of what your labs mean and it's color coded so you can see if it's in normal range. Because normal range for who? Was the standard database that you're putting my information in, did it include what percentage of women, one, what percentage of women my age, two, what percentage of women with the similar or same lifestyle or history as me? So that's another thing that we definitely pride ourselves here and that we want to educate people on, is that yes, you can get these different tests or diagnostic tools done anywhere, but just know that it's not going to be the same wherever you get it. So if you're shopping around and you can find something like price wise, you're thinking, why is this one cost this and this one doesn't cost this? It could be the quality of what you're looking for. So when we look at the EEG, we actually are trained to read raw data. And that's something that neurologists within their 7-year residency, that's what they do. But in regular medical school, you spend one module on EEG findings. Most providers, from in a time efficiency standpoint, they actually just pop it in to a normative database. And the problem that we found with that, and it's getting more recognition now, but that normative database is usually middle-aged white men. Okay, so one, biologically, men and women's brains are structurally different. Women have more corpus callosums, which means our emotional reactivity and our emotional receptors. And it's not that men don't have any, but if you're just popping my data into that, you're going to think, oh, she's in a normal range. And actually, I could be deficient in that, or you could see a hormone imbalance, because it's not that simple. And then it also might take out things that we do need to bring attention to, that it thinks it's just artifact or an eye blink or you moved your jaw, and it's like, no, there's actually things. So it's very important to realize what the hormonal imbalances can look like in your life, and then knowing whether, okay, am I just being dramatic or making this up, or is there actually something? So things like when you feel in a constant state of anxiety out of nowhere, you just wake up anxious, or you're fine and then boom, it hits you like a truck and you don't know what happened. If you're depression resistant to any medications or therapy alone, so we call these refractory cases. If you tried 3 or more psychiatric medications, specifically SSRIs, and you're not responding, or it works for 3 months and then doesn't work, that is a big blaring alarm red flag for a hormonal imbalance. It has nothing to do with you and how you metabolize medicine. Like some psychiatrists tell us, yeah, my body's metabolizing this way because it's not actually what I need. So it's never going to fix the issue. Now, obviously, there's times if you need it, that's fine. But I think really, again, looking at the whole person is really good. And again, with the therapy, there's only so many things you can talk therapy out. I can tell you how to cope with some of the symptoms you're having, or how to advocate for yourself when the doctor automatically shuts you down. But if you're having an estrogen issue, we can't fix that. I'm on this side of the room and you're on that side of the room. There's something deeper than that. I mean, it's not going to be fixed on a couch. So things like brain fog, memory issues, poor concentration, things that were like, oh, I'm just tired, I'm just burnt out, I'm fatigued. Yes, all those things could be true, but have you ever thought that, I've been feeling tired, burnt out, and fatigued for 10 plus years. I just kind of got used to it, but now it feels worse. It's probably you've been in a hormone deficit in some capacity that whole time. And then another example would be sleep disturbantion or emotional overwhelmingness. Like if you cry at everything, and crying is just an emotional response. I know that makes people uncomfortable, but my emotional reactivity, if it's that sensitive to where I'm legit crying at everything, yes, it may be because postpartum or pregnant or whatever, but you know what we always link that back to? Hormones. Her hormones are all over the place. We say things like this to downplay it or to not take it as seriously when it does need to be looked at. So there's other ways that you can also see hormone imbalances in real life, but those are some of the main ones that women usually deal with, that we put our cape on and call ourselves superwoman and keep going throughout the day when there's actually something wrong. And if you can go to the next slide, please. So looking deeper than just symptoms, the whole premise, just to bring it full circle, of this talk is that women are usually treated for symptoms and not root causes. So how can we break that kind of code or process and see, okay, what can we do to help? So here at the Houston Brain Center, to better understand what's happening with our symptom manifestations or how they're presenting, we use a combination of objective assessment tools that are relevant to evaluate everyday brain functioning. So similar to what Angela and Renata said about you can get your blood work, but if you're going and you fasted for 8 hours, it's probably not a true accurate description or a picture of who you are, what you're dealing with, because as soon as you eat, if something gets spiked, we're not testing that. So looking at things overall and in the daily life. So again, we do EEG. QEEG is quantitative electroencephalogram, and that's when we're actually able to look at all 19 of your brain waves in real time, and you can actually see at what frequency your brain is producing hertz. And why that's important is on a structural level, depending on things like biological, social, and psychological factors, it should be within a certain range, right? And we specifically customize it to you. So if it's out of whack, then what's going on? To understand what clinical patterns are being identified as anxiety, depression, attention deficit, or emotional dysregulation. And so that is a diagnostic tool. Now, if you're looking for treatment, something that we offer would be neurofeedback. And neurofeedback, it is how you would train for a more optimal lifestyle. So just think of balance, equilibrium, optimal functioning, this realm of things. It's something that I am very passionate about because I've actually done it myself. And I've been working here at the Houston Brain Center for 6 years. So I've seen the impact it's made on patients as early as 5, as up to a 2-time stroke survivor in her 80s. And so seeing across the lifespan how taking the more holistic approach and optimally or organically training your own body to where it does need to be naturally, and seeing how can we support targeted brain training that can promote self-regulation, or how we can improve neural pathway efficiency, that we can actually see, okay, we've done the assessment, we're looking at the training, and you notice, oh, I don't feel anxious, and you're like, I wonder if because it wasn't an actual anxiety thing, or if you do still feel anxiety, it's not at the level you thought it was, because we're able to help with that. A lot of times people are like, I never heard this. How come I've never heard of this? I hear the terms all the time, woo woo. Is this woo woo? What are you doing? And I'm like, it's been around since the 60s. There's thousands of articles on PubMed. It is based in holistic Eastern medicine. So it does originate from Eastern countries, but it's been in the US since the 60s. And we call it the Great Migration of Neurofeedback or Applied Psychophysiology, because even though it came from the eastern side of the globe, somehow it started in California, like most holistic things, and it's trickling back this way. Trying to educate people on that, and knowing that if I'm on 12 medicines, I only want to be on 2 that I actually need. How can I do that? Or if I'm on 2 and I want to be on 0, or what are the things I can do in my daily life to actually change that to where I won't need medication anymore? If I do, it's because it's for a short amount of time and I'm trying to just do a protocol and then I'm done with it. Then moving on to the counseling side. So when we think about things like the medical gaslighting or how to cope with our symptoms, there is that piece where we can address how would you deal with this from a psychological or a life coaching perspective. So emotional processing, behavior patterns, stress regulation, things like that. That is where you want to think about counseling. So if you were to do it in steps, right? If you start off with your nutrition and then move on down the ladder of kind of where we're going, and then you still, after all that, still feel a little off, you're like, okay, I'm there, but I want an A+. I don't just want a B+. Then you would start off with the diagnostic tool, move on to the treatment. And then if there's still something, you realize, okay, now what kind of lifestyle interventions can I do? How can I implement things at the beginning of my day or at the end of my day to help that? And we think about brain-based interventions, whether that's the EEG, the counseling, or the hormone considerations that are integrated. Treatment moves beyond just symptom suppression and toward long-term functional improvement. And that's really what we want. Our goal is not for you guys to need us forever. We want to be a part of your life and a pivotal moment in your character arc, if you may, but we don't want to be around forever. That's not what we're here for. But in this case, just think of it as the opposite. We want to get to know you really good, and then we don't want to talk to you again. So not in the capacity of our office, at least. Just circling back to what neurofeedback is as far as my experience. So my personal experience with neurofeedback, I used to get rage and hormonal migraines. And what I mean by that is my husband breathing could set me off. This was like 5 years ago. And I was like, why are you breathing? And he's like, wow, why am I breathing? I'm like, yeah, stop breathing. That's how upset I was. And I just, the sound of someone breathing, lights, it can be pitch black in a room. And if the blinds are closed, but you can still see peaks of light, that would hurt. Anybody talking, anything like that would hurt so bad, be out of commission. And I was getting those like maybe 2 to 3 times a month, which is obviously not normal. So most people, my first step was to go to my PCP, let her know what's going on. I was immediately put on 3 medications, an onset dissolvable tab for my tongue, a nasal spray that was supposed to help, and then a preventative at nighttime. And I was taking those 3, and yeah, maybe I wasn't getting 2 or 3 migraines a month, but I was still getting at least 1. And if I didn't take the medicine, because it would immediately come back, so I knew that something was really wrong. And so doing my research, and it just happened to come up in the office one day, and Dr. Morrow was like, you know that there's probably something structurally going on, because that's not typical. And we can just do an EEG, whether you choose to do neurofeedback or not, that's up to you. I'm not gonna pry into it, but we should at least see what's going on. We have the tools for it. Even if you don't do any treatment, I always tell people, at least get the diagnostic tool. You can do whatever you want after that, but I feel like it's better to know all the information that you need to know versus just wonder what piece of it is going on. So did the EEG, and actually you could structurally see deficiencies in my temporal lobe. And so it was what we call the cold zone. And that's because it was functioning under the minimum hertz that it needed to. And you could see, we put it in the heat thermography map visually, but it was legit blue, which is the lowest level. So something comparable, if someone had concussions or TBIs, it mimics depressive symptoms, because people think, oh, you can't get out of bed, your motivation, your all these things that externally would be put on the basis of it's psychological or it's depressive. And I'm having an actual structural issue. My brain is not functioning like it needs to be in that certain area, in that lobe of my brain. So if you look at the lobe versus the part of the brain, the temporal lobe is where your hypothalamus is. It's the edge of your pituitary gland and where your cerebellum is. So all those things are structurally not functioning properly, causing symptoms to show up in my temporal lobe. If you go back, what all those things regulate and look at, you will see your GABA is back there, right? So I'm missing key nutrients. You'll see things that my HPA axis and things of that nature. You'll see that my pituitary gland, and that regulates things, and why I feel off, why my migraines happen to be around the same time each month that I didn't even realize. I was getting them the exact same time every month because of the cycle syncing, what my body was naturally going through on a hormonal basis. And so I was able to do 30-minute sessions of neurofeedback. It's the same premise of operant conditioning. So if you guys have ever taken like a psych class, when we think about Pavlov and how he got his dog to salivate for food every time he rang a bell, it's the same premise as that. You have an auditory and a visual manipulation. So usually we do a TV show or a movie, and depending on what lobe of your brain we're training, it's just like a disc electrode. It's from the outside, and we're actually able to read your real-time ratings and able to use the variables of either, there's three different modalities, but there's video, audio, or pause play, and seeing how we can get your body to naturally respond, because everyone's brain doesn't respond the same. It's the most complex organ in the body. It's the organ we know the least about, that we should know the most about, but that's how complex it is. I think that through my personal experience, and when I advocate so much, is because after just those 30 sessions, and this was 5.5 years ago, or a little bit around the time of like the ending of COVID shutdown, I maybe occasionally get the regular like headache or seasonal allergies or hungry dehydration, but I can count on my hand the number of migraines I got in a single year, whereas I couldn't count that over a quarter time period. So I will always advocate for any holistic approach, especially one that I've tried, because I've seen the difference it can make and getting to the root of the issue. Because if I didn't explore it that way, I would have still been on my 3 different medications. So that's advocacy story on that, and what got me into wanting to, I want to get into educating people on this, whether they know about it or they don't. I just think it's very beneficial. So if you have any more questions, we're about to do the live Q&A, and then you'll get our contact information.
Thank you so much for great information. We have a couple of questions I believe that we have not covered. This one comes from Jackie. I thought cycles usually get further apart in menopause, but mine are getting shorter over time, like 26 versus 28 days on the regular. Any reason for that, normal or not?
Okay, so I'm going to hop in to answer that. I think that is such a great question, Jackie. And I think that we also have someone else in the chat that had mentioned that they also have really short cycles. So as we start to get into perimenopause, peri meaning around the time of menopause. So perimenopause is the lead up into menopause, which is when we have officially not had a cycle for 12 months minimum. So just to make sure that we understand the distinction between those two things is really important. So as we begin getting into the perimenopausal journey, what we do start to see is our cycles shorten as our hormone levels are changing. And this is something that Wendy had mentioned in the very first speaking session of today. That is typically normal because our body is starting to not produce as much of the hormones as we've discussed today. So we do start to see cycle shortening. And then after that initial phase, we could say, of perimenopause, then we start to see the lengthening happening as we truly start to minimize the amount of the various hormones that are being produced. And depending on what's going on in your life, for instance, if you're undergoing a lot of increased stress, that can exacerbate the shortening or the lengthening of these cycles, depending on where you're at in perimenopause. So don't worry. It is something that can occur. And for every woman, and this is very important, we are all unique individuals. And so we may experience quite a few different nuances as we get into the perimenopausal journey. But the key here, as I always like to tell my clients, is make notes. Make notes of what you're experiencing, when you're experiencing them, because this can give us so much information to identify patterns as we're going through any kind of hormonal change. So keep writing down your notes, bring it to your doctors, bring it to your practitioners, and let's continue to observe these things over time.
Okay, another question. Patty has a question. I will get to your question, Patty. Another one that I don't think that we have addressed is if someone has gotten to the point where they've gotten a hysterectomy, what can be done after that as far as finding a regular balance once again?
So I'm happy to hop in and answer this one because I think that it's such a great question and more women are undergoing hysterectomies. So for a radical hysterectomy, which is where we have the removal of the uterus, cervix, and ovaries. What's really important to consider here is the bioidentical hormonal replacement therapy. That can often be something that can be implemented very quickly to help you to start feeling relief from the perimenopausal or menopausal symptoms, I should say. Obviously, we want to be finding a practitioner such as Wendy who can look at your lab work in detail and listen to what you're experiencing to define a care plan that is really impactful for you. Now, if we don't want to do the bioidentical hormone replacement therapy right off the bat, which I know that for many women, there's some concern around it, which is absolutely understandable. There are still lots of things that we can do nutritionally and lifestyle-wise to help to support minimizing some of these symptoms. So for me, I always like to start off with phytoestrogen-rich foods. So phyto meaning plants and estrogen-rich meaning that it's plants that have an estrogen-like quality that can help with mimicking estrogen, even though your body is not making it. And so these can be things such as soy products. Obviously, I mentioned really good quality soy products, but also things like flax seeds, chickpeas, lentils, etc. Also reducing inflammation as much as possible. So dialing up those whole foods, increasing your omega-3 fatty acids, as well as having those high fiber cruciferous vegetables all help with reducing inflammation in the body as much as possible. We can also think about any supplementation that your specific body needs. So looking at those lab panels, we did answer a question in the chat about what labs to do to look for deficiencies. That would be an absolutely amazing place to start in order to devise what actually do I specifically need to feel better. And in addition to that, something that we talk about a lot at Buhai, as well as in my practice, is adaptogens. So these are hormone supportive herbs that help our bodies to adapt to stress. So things like ashwagandha, maca root, especially for perimenopause, black cohosh, red clover, chasteberry, or vitex is another name for it. They've all been shown to be particularly helpful and can have a really powerful impact if you've had that radical hysterectomy.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And then Patty shared that her gratitude and that she felt so alone. I think a lot of us feel alone. You're not alone at all, Patty. There are so many women along with you. There were almost 60 women that were registered just for this webinar alone. So just know, first of all, you are not alone and there are other answers. She's been suffering with different things for a while, but now mostly lately, she's been dealing with daily backache and tightness in her pelvic area. So just need to find a root cause.
A lot of times I see achiness, muscle aches, back pains, and musculoskeletal fill in the blank, low estrogen. So it's very protective. It is necessary. Or a lot of times we will see shoulder pain is a really common one for women as they are losing balance of their hormones. And so I would say anytime you have any musculoskeletal concerns that are unexplained, like you didn't have an injury there, but something still hurts, to always explore your hormonal balance, because it is usually largely in part for those hormones shifting. And probably Dr. Angela, I would have to say she's probably got something else to add to that as well. Being a chiropractor, she probably gets this complaint.
It's so interesting you said that, Wendy. And then I'll answer two things because Sarah had a question. But with what Wendy was saying, what's interesting about the chiropractic world is you can literally put your hands on a female and feel estrogen dominance if it's bad. There's actually a change in the tissue. And I've seen women young and as they age have issues like this chronic hamstring pain that never goes away. And it's because the tissue has grown to be so dense and it relates back to hormonal issues. And so you can get all the chiropractic care in the world, and maybe that helps a little bit, but to get to the root cause, it could be a hormonal imbalance. And we see that with frozen shoulder. When a woman comes to the office for frozen shoulder, I'm immediately asking, have you checked your hormones? Yes, we can work on this chiropractically, but where's your estrogen level? Have you checked that? Has it tanked? Has it dropped? Because that could be an issue that we want to work along with this. And then Sarah was asking about adenomyosis. And I'm not the expert in that, so Renata or Wendy may jump in too, but she was just asking, is there a way to stop the progression of it? Because some of the doctors have said, we don't know why women get it. And it does go back to this issue of, I don't want to say the main cause, the root cause, but it is associated with this estrogen dominance. And so a part of answering that, I would say, is absolutely look at the gut. I know that I tend to look at the gut a lot, but when you do look at the gut, first of all, any kind of tissue. So for anyone that doesn't know, adenomyosis is like the endometrial tissue grows into the muscular wall of the uterus. When you have that happening, there's always some low level of inflammation happening. So you can, one, start with the gut with food, like Renata said, but then you want to see, why is that low level inflammation hanging out? If you didn't know, if the colon is inflamed, that inflammation actually is transient and passes into tissue around it. So you can see someone with endometriosis, they can get a bigger flare in it when the gut is inflamed because those organs are right beside each other and they share those inflammatory cytokines. And so absolutely look at surrounding organs when you're talking about uterine health and underlying inflammation. So the gut could be a place to look. Might not be the only answer. And that's why I said maybe Wendy or Renata can share too. But it is a place to look because there is a marker on the GI map called beta glucuronidase that actually can show you if you're cycling harmful estrogens back into the body, into the gut. It's called estrobolome, which is like everyone's heard of the microbiome, but there's this concept called the estrobolome, which is this biome in the gut that actually helps you process estrogen. So if that's not happening, then yeah, there's going to be this chronic low level inflammation that can cause tissue to then be inflamed and then act in a way that it was not meant to act.
Yeah, I'm happy to add a couple other little notes onto that as well. Anytime we have a thickening of something in the body, which is basically what that is, I first ask myself, is there an obvious reason why it got there? Sometimes with surgeries, so if they've had past abortion, D&C, fibroids removed, any other type of pelvic surgery, sometimes that part of those other organ or linings can get pushed in and it starts to cause a thickening because the body is trying to heal and respond to that, and that kind of starts the process. But it definitely can be stopped. It is, again, like Angela said, a big source of inflammation, but it's also being fed by estrogen dominance. So oftentimes they'll go, oh, your estrogen looks fine. Check progesterone. Remember, I talked earlier about that ratio. So if the estrogen looks fine, but they're not addressing the low progesterone in relation directly to it. So not just that your progesterone is low normal and your estrogen is high normal, that's still an imbalance. They have to be balanced. Otherwise, it's feeding that thickening over and over again. Another thing that feeds thickening is low thyroidism, low thyroid function. That slows and thickens everything in the body, which sets you up for more dysregulation. And then also the body's ability to detox. I talked a little bit about that earlier. If the liver is not tuned up, it's not going to clear out excess estrogens and hormones, and they just build up and adds to the thickening and adds to the whole process and adds more inflammation. So I think as a summary, I would say make sure balance your progesterone and estrogen, make sure you have good liver and gut health and clearance with the GI map test for sure. Lower your overall inflammation in the body, whatever's leading or feeding to that situation, like big ones that everybody can avoid inflammation, the big top foods, and maybe Renata has more, but oils are horribly inflammatory in the body. And I'm talking about like frying oils and not particularly seed oils, but anything but pure seed oils. And sugar, alcohol, dairy is another one. But again, addressing things that we're taking in on a 3 times a day basis to lead to inflammation and just restore your neurotransmitter signals, and with things like what Brianna talked about. So it is really pretty much a culmination of everything we talked about today. So, but great question.
Okay, I think we have 2 minutes for one more question. Someone said, I wish I had known about all of this before I was an adult. Amen. That's why we're sharing this. A question that has come in just is, everyone that is registered is going to get this as a recording. It might take a day or two until I have the recording ready, but don't worry. If you are registered, you will have this recording available to you to watch back. One last question that we have a minute or two to answer is regarding cellulite. They're wondering if cellulite, not only in the legs, but in the abdomen and other places, could be related to hormone imbalance. And if you fix hormone imbalance, will it go away?
So I just wanted to hop here to talk about that cellulite question, which I think is such a great relatable question for all of us as women. So yes, it can be driven by a hormonal imbalance, and typically estrogen is the primary driver. So when we're talking about that, we've already spoken about the different ways that we can help to clear estrogen from the body, in addition to supporting progesterone levels. And typically when we do this, in addition to obviously ensuring your thyroid is working really well, we can see a reduction in cellulite, because cellulite is not just fat on the body, right? So we want to be able to understand what cellulite is and what it isn't, and know that there are a lot of supportive nutrition that can help to reduce that in the body.
Okay, thank you. Leah, can we go to the next slide? So we are going to wrap things up. Thank you so much to our speakers and everyone who has been active and listening. And thank you to everyone that will watch the playback. There are lots of places where you can reach us. Naturalhealthnetwork.org has the blog, the directory where you can find vetted providers, products, and services that are holistic minded, and Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Please connect with us there. Also, you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter. There you can get access to, you can ask questions just like this. If you have some burning questions, then often I will put them out there to our member providers to answer, and then we will write a blog to get back to you or do a quick interview. So there's so many resources through the Natural Health Network to help you get those questions answered. Don't continue to feel alone. You are not alone. This is your community where you can find solid, science-backed, experience-backed information from so many lovely practitioners. So thank you again for joining us. I hope that you will stay in touch, and we will see you again. I'm sure we'll do one of these again because we're constantly getting questions. So thanks to all of our speakers. Everyone have the best day.